Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Force with some more Elder Scrolls Online discussion. In today's video, I would like to talk with you about CC and the PvE experience in ESO. Mainly I'd like to raise the question, does crowd control make ESO PvE too easy? Now, we are only talking about a select portion of the game. A couple things to keep in mind. Number one, in PvP, CC abilities can be broken and players granted temporary immunity. So it's not as big of a deciding factor there. And you know, there are still complaints that people are having about CC and PvP, but that's not what we're here to discuss. Also, this does not pertain to what we would consider actual instanced PvE. So we're talking about the 4-player group PvE dungeons, where that's which, you know, there's the leveling experience, and then there's the what we consider endgame PvE, which is traditionally instance-based and group-based, requiring strategies and boss fights and stuff like that. The CC isn't as much of a problem there because the bosses are immune to CC. And then also, one last caveat is that there are certain mobs within the world, basically many of the flying monsters you'll come up against, that are immune to a lot of those crowd control effects. So there is definitely a portion of this game where this is going to come into effect. However, there is a large portion where it might be a little bit too much of a problem. You know, in a lot of my videos, I see responses with people saying, this game looks so easy, the mobs don't even do anything. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is they're not doing anything most of the time because I'm locking them down, either with opener, heavy stealth attacks that are incapacitating them, or just using snare or immobilize abilities which stop the AI from literally moving or responding. So that is something that can be permanently done on a big portion of the mobs in this game. Basically anything ground and melee based can be permanently controlled and not even touch you. So there's the question, is it too much? Is it too much, and does that make this game too easy when it comes to the leveling experience in ESO? Now what you're seeing in the background is me going up against some of the world bosses in the game. These are the skull and crossbone areas on the map, which are supposed to be done by a group, but as you can see here, as long as you've got any kiting ability or any control ability to lock them down and keep them out of your range, it's no problem whatsoever. Now, there are certainly world bosses that are ranged, like spellcasters or archers, or there are certain world bosses that are flying that you're not able to incapacitate like this. But I would say that a good portion of the ones that I have come up against have been able to be controlled, and as such have been incredibly easy for me to do with a ranged setup. And even if you're playing as a melee build, you could just quickly, you know, throw on a bow or destruction staff, use any of these knockdown or control abilities, and keep them from damaging you. And even with the casters, you could quite easily lock them down with stuns and incapacitates and interrupts to stop them from hitting you. So, again, this all comes back to the question, is this too much or is it okay? You know, from my perspective, a lot of times when I see the comments talking about the game's difficulty, I'm always scratching my head thinking, well, this is an MMO, and this is the leveling experience. You know, you're not looking at an endgame dungeon. You're not looking at endgame PvE. We're obviously not looking at adventure zones because that's not even in the beta at the moment. So there's a lot of what most people consider the real content that you have to worry about difficulty that we're not even taking a look at. And when it comes to leveling experience, frankly, I don't expect it to be super difficult, not because I don't want a challenge, but just because that's how a lot of MMOs are designed. The leveling experience is primarily meant to be solo. There are portions of it, like group dungeons as you're leveling up, that you're needing to group up for, and there are portions of it that you're supposed to be grouping up for, like these elite bosses, but again, as you can see, and as we've been talking about, well, that might not be entirely necessary as long as you have any CC abilities. If you don't know what I'm talking about, CC stands for crowd control, and again, that's talking about any snares that slow up your opponent, any immobilizes that lock them in place, any stuns that lock them down and stop them from responding whatsoever. All of these abilities make it so that a vast majority of the enemies you come across while you're leveling up in this game will barely touch you if you're running a range build. And again, even if you're running a melee-focused build, the stuns, the incapacitates can still stop the enemies from hitting you. So now this is where I pass the question on to you guys. How do you feel about crowd control in this game? And those of you with prior MMO experience, how do you feel it compares to other games? Once more, as a reminder, this is really only talking about the leveling experience when you're in PvE instance dungeons. The crowd control is only affecting the trash mobs in between bosses. The bosses themselves cannot be CC'd, and also it's not every mob within the open world PvE single player environment, because the flying mobs aren't as affected by that. And obviously you're not going to be kiting around any of the spellcasters or the archers because they can still do range damage to you, but you can still stun them and you can still incapacitate them, which stops them from doing damage. So is that okay with you? Do you feel it's too much from this game, be it from playing it in the past or just from watching any of the footage that you've seen here today or in my prior ESO videos? And if you feel like it's too much, how do you think they should go about changing it? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. Frankly, again, I am not overly concerned about being able to solo this stuff because that's what I expect from a leveling experience. Now, if I was going into 4-player group dungeons and I was able to CC and clear these entire dungeons by myself, then I think we'd have more of a problem. But when it comes to this type of content, I personally think it's really not that big of a deal, and I'm surprised so many people are getting up in arms. It really just leads me to believe that they don't have much experience with leveling in MMOs, because any game that I've ever played, most of the content I've been able to solo when it comes to MMOs. So that's just my opinion, guys. Again, I'd love to hear yours, though, in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for more ESO coverage coming up. And as always, keep watching and keep owning.